Tribe GG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back once again on this beautiful Thursday morning, the 11th of December 2025. We are edging closer towards the end of the year 2025, which I must admit has not been the easiest of years to go through, but we are glad we are still alive and kicking. And I wanted to, call upon on a saying that before you die, never sort of, it's like before you die, never regret life in that sort of sense. Anyways, like I said, it's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Thursday morning. We will be digesting what did transpire last night in as far as in as far as the UEFA Champions League was concerned, but we'll also get a chance to take a glimpse into what's to come in as far as this Thursday is concerned. Of course, we know the UEFA Champions League is wrapped up, at least for the year 2025, but the UEFA Conference League and the UEFA Europa League do get underway, at least I think for one more time. Is it one more time this season? I will cross-check really. We'll cross-check to find that out in regards to their schedule, because sometimes there's a small disparity in terms of the scheduling of the UEFA Europa League and the UEFA Conference Leagues, respectively, who are destined, by the way, for match day 6 as well. So should be, I think the case should be that their action does also get underway today, and then do return on the 22nd of January. So yeah, looks like there's not much difference there. So we'll be talking about that and much more in today's broadcast. We'll look at Arsenal's impressive victory over Club Brugge. We'll talk about Real Madrid getting beaten despite the kind of effort that they put up yesterday, losing to a worthy opponent in Manchester City. If we are being honest, if we are being fair to Xabi Alonso, especially in the wake of speculation that his future at Real Madrid could be at risk, especially in the wake of that defeat. Those reports coming in before that game. We'll get to talk about the return of Gabriel Jesus for the Arsenal. We'll get to talk about all the other things, including Brad Erling Haaland sort of taking a dig at Yemi Karaga in a bit of a joking way, in the post-match press conference, or press interview there that did transpire in the aftermath of Manchester City's 2-1 victory against Real Madrid in the UEFA Champions League. But before I proceed any further, allow me to have our audios tested just to make sure everything does check out perfectly well for the purposes of this broadcast, and then also and then we'll take it from there. Otherwise, I think our audio is good. We're good to go. Everything does check out perfectly well. So, like I said, there's only one place to start, and that's the UEFA Champions League. So many results, good results, so many surprisingly bad results from last night. From last night, particularly, I was disappointed in the game between PSG and Athletic Bilbao. I had not envisioned that goal as draw, really. But I mean, it's football. Anything can happen. You can join us just sharing the link with the some people that could be joining our morning broadcast. But then quickly. We'll get to also, Enric Lama. Sorry, not Enric Lama. Enric, Real Madrid's Enric. I don't know. I don't know what to really make of him. For a player that doesn't get a lot of playing time at Real Madrid, I thought he had a good cameo, by the way, yesterday. Also, maybe if time allows us, we'll also get into that as well. But I thought the evening was quite impressive. If you're an Arsenal fan, I think there are plenty of positives to take away from that game, as well as negatives, depending on how you look at things. Depending on how you look at things in the way set up his team, and things like that. So as they did happen last night. So we'll do the run of and then we'll get to discuss the respective fixtures in terms of the actual results and the observations that we did make from last night. Of course, yesterday kicked off with games against Villarreal, getting beaten up by Copenhagen by 3-2. Then we had Ajax sort of bounce back to get their first victory of the league phase of the UEFA Champions League when they beat up against Karabakh by 4-2. Bayer Leverkusen and Newcastle shared the spoils in a 2-2 draw. Really, Benfica beat up against Napoli by 2-0. I told you in the build-up to that game that Benfica needed to be perfect in that game. They needed nothing shy of a victory to brighten their chances of at least making it to the playoffs if they can win the remaining 2 games, because now that victory takes them to 6 points, as we will get to see possibly at some point in regards of the context of the UEFA Champions League table. Bilbao against PSG, that was a goalless draw, while Juventus, Winston McKennie and Jonathan David scored a goal each in the second half to make sure that Juventus won that game by 2-0. Borussia Dortmund in a 2-2 draw against Bodo Glimt. Whereas Bodo Glimt is a very good side, I did not expect that kind of result for Borussia Dortmund, specifically not. But of course, like I said, Real Madrid getting beaten by Manchester City by 2-1 will have a dip into that. But like I said, there's only one place to start, and that's the game between Arsenal and Club Brugge, because Arsenal are at the summit of the UEFA Champions League standings, having won the game by 3-0. 2 different goal scorers, one a usual suspect because he's now scored in 5 consecutive UEFA Champions League games. The first player to do it ever for the Arsenal. But before we get into the depth of the game itself, here's how Arsenal set up. Of course, we did expect some of these changes to be made. David Raya started in goal, Pierre-Emerick alongside Christian Nogard. I did not envision Christian Nogard being played at centre-back. Ben White was at right-back with Miles Lewis-Kelly getting minutes under his belt at left-back. Mikel Merino playing alongside Martin Zubimendi and Martin Odegaard in that midfield. Gabriel Martinelli, Victor Gyökeres, and Noni Madueke were the starters for the Arsenal. Now, the reason as to why I wanted to start from the starting 11 is because, one, I did not expect Martin Zubimendi to start the game, but I also understand why he started the game, especially in the absence of Declan Rice. Whereas changes are good, Mikel Arteta is also aware of the fact that one too many changes across all departments can be a recipe for disaster, because again, and this is the part where I feel for him, or I get to understand where he's coming from in playing Martin Zubimendi in a game where I thought he should be rested, is that you have a centre-back pairing of Pierre-Emerick and Christian Nogard. Now, this is the first time in Arsenal colours that we're seeing Christian Nogard starting as a centre-back. In fact, that made it the 7th different pairing of Arsenal centre-back, a setup so far this season, all because of injuries. Ben White at right back, that was okay. Miles Lewis-Kelly, a lot of us were thinking maybe Ricardo Carafiori starts the game because he is going to be suspended for the game over the weekend, but I also completely understand and acknowledge the fact that Miles Lewis-Kelly needed to get minutes under his belt just to get into some bit of playing rhythm ahead of the game against Wolverhampton Wanderers. But also, let's not forget that Ricardo Carafiori had suffered a bit of a knock in that game against Aston Villa, and like the manager said, they needed to manage his game time, his minutes, and practically that's what they did. They brought him on in the second half. We'll get to discuss his performance in a bit. Then Mikel Merino in that midfield alongside Martin Zubimendi. This pair used to play together at Real Sociedad before Martin Zubimendi joined the club last summer, and prior to that, of course, Mikel Merino joined. That's at the start of the 2023-2024. Prior to the start of the 2024-2025 campaign, really. And then Martin Odegaard, who we know not so long ago just returned from injury. And then Victor Gyökeres, same story. Noni Madueke, same story. Gabriel Martinelli, same story. They've all recently returned from injuries. Then a night that welcomed back Gabriel Jesus, I think for the first time in Arsenal colours in 332 days. That's almost close on a year, really. And I thought he had a very, very impressive performance. So Now, a lot of people may think, it's Club Brugge. Well, it's not just Club Brugge because they're not an easy opponent to go about. Irrespective of the managerial changes they had gone through prior to the kick of this game, we are talking about the same side that managed to hold Barcelona in a 3-3 draw against, at their own turf. And then we are talking about a team that are very, very capable of scoring. And yet Arsenal somehow managed to keep a clean sheet. Now, I did mention in the preamble that whereas there were positives to take away from this game, there were also negatives. What were the negatives? For me, the negatives, one, Arsenal conceded so many shots on target. And whereas it was against a worthy opponent, it was a bit worrying and concerning for me. And whereas there are mitigating circumstances that contribute to that or that you put into perspective to understand why that was the case, I thought that was one too many shots on target. For example, statistically, they dominated possession just slightly to the tune of 51% compared to 49% of Club Brugge, which for which they got better in the second half, even though Arsenal scored 2 goals of those in the second half. But Arsenal had 13 shots on target. In total, they had 16 shots. This is according to online statistics. In case you find varying numbers elsewhere, please be mindful of your source or the difference between your source and my source. And then, Club Brugge had 16 shots on target as well. Sorry, on goal as well. They had 7 on target. 7 shots on target. Not too long ago, we're talking about Arsenal barely getting at. Like you struggled to even get a shot on target in this Arsenal side. Remember the game against Crystal Palace? They had to even conjure a shot on target of Edin Nketiah Seda. Burnley, teams like West Ham hardly had a sniff. They were not conceding shots on target, Arsenal. Now, but like I said, because they've gone through so many changes, and particularly in their defensive formation, you sort of understand that the sort of level of performance between the main starters and the replacements is not always going to be the same. But I thought conceding 7 shots on target was a bit concerning, was a bit worrying, especially going into the weekend against a Wolverhampton Wanderers team. Now, Wolves may look weak and for all intents and purposes, the worst team in the Premier League. But let's not forget that until you played that game and put it on the side, it's not always going to be an easy fixture. How many times have we seen the unlikely side pick up decent results against who you would think is a favorite or the dominant side? We've seen that one too many times in football for us to be complacent that they are incapable, Wolves, as bad as they are, of getting a result against Arsenal. So, for me, conceding 7 shots on target, and had it not been for the heroics of David Raya, him being alert and having that perfect sight on the night, I think we would be talking about possibly a different score. Now, make no mistake, Arsenal could have won this game by 6, possibly 7 goals or 5. But my point is that Club Brugge could have easily or equally gotten some goals in this game. I do not want to say they were not clinical because I want to give David Raya his flowers because he did a lot to make sure that Arsenal stayed in the game, particularly at that stage when it was still 1-0, particularly when it was still 1-0. So really, I thought that was really, really impressive from him. Dennis Joke says, hi, everyone. Newcastle gave that game away 2-2. Should have been 4-1 after hitting the bar twice and poor defensive lapses. I mean, at this kind of level, you get punished for your inefficiency or ineffectiveness, and then you get punished for the mistakes. So really, that's the sort of level that you're trading at. And speaking of punishing mistakes, you saw Arsenal's second goal against Club Brugge when Martin Zubimendi crosses in the ball. It's Noni Madueke literally running by himself to get his head on that ball with no defender tracking him, with the goalkeeper seemingly, I don't know, being caught off guard or something like that, and they got punished. That was at the very start of the second half. So, in other words, I thought Arsenal had a very, very good performance. I want to give Anoni Madueke his flowers because the way he goes on to take on that first goal, I mean, it's brilliant. He had to shrug off, I think two midfielders and, find the way to strike that ball past defenders and beat the goalkeeper. He kisses the inside of the crossbar before hitting the back of the net. Impressive goal. Martin Zubimendi providing the assist in that one. And then, of course, in the second stanza, he provided the assist. Noni Madueke's header. And then, I mean, before we even get to the second, Arsenal had very, very good moments in the first half. Martin Odegaard had an attempt at goal. Of course, it was saved. Victor Gyökeres had a bit of a weak header. It did not have enough pace to it because the flight of the ball had been off a header from Gabriel Martinelli. So he didn't have the strength to trouble the Club Brugge goalkeeper, who I thought equally had a very, very good day in office. When you take away the 3 goals, 2 of which were very, very decent goals that would have beaten any goalkeeper as decent as they could be, take away that second goal, and he had a very, very good night regardless. And there's another moment in the first half when Noni Madueke still forces him into a brilliant save. Then there was another chance for Piero Hincapié, who hit the upright in his attempt to find the back of the net. Then there's another moment. I'm trying to remember whose attempt it was, but with Arsenal 16 shots on goal and having 13 of those on target is what tells you the kind of work that Van den Haval had to do in that Club Brugge goal. Juk says PSV home last game. Do not know how the knockout stages work. What is a pass mark of Eddie Howe in the Premier League, and will the Saudis fire him if we do not finish in the top 8? Dennis, we're going to discuss that in a bit. Allow me to wrap up this Arsenal game. We go through the Man City game, and then we get to Newcastle. But I've already said that in football, present day, in modern day football, you do not get a lot of time if things are not going your way. We've seen it with different managers. We've seen it with Ange Postecoglou at Nottingham Forest. We've seen it with Nuno Espirito Santo. We've seen it with Vita Pereira at Wolverhampton Wanderers. You never know, Rob Edwards could be next, but we'll get to discuss that. In terms of other performers, I thought Piero Hincapié had an okay game. I thought Tresoldi gave him a bit of a rough time, particularly in the first half. He accommodated him so much into physical duels. There was a lot of shot pulling on both sides, which I thought the referee managed that situation really, really well. He did not get out of hand. He did not try to over-officiate the game the way some referees do, because on another case, Arsenal would have considered a couple of free kicks off of those duels, or maybe even consider a yellow card, maybe for Tresoldi or for Hincapié, depending on how you would have seen things. But I thought Tresoldi was doing well enough to drag Hincapié out of position. What they did not do, Club Brugge, is leverage on the space that then he was leaving in behind him. Every time he sort of dragged him away from his position. And yeah, that was one of my observations. Alex puts a question to us saying, why does it always seem like we do not create enough chances for Gyökeres? Merino gets plenty of the ball when he plays as a striker, and Gabriel Jesus had several chances in just 25 minutes. Again, now, my perspective about Victor Gyökeres has to do with multiple factors. One, he's a player adapting to play the Arsenal way. And remember, we're talking about a player who is 27. We're not talking about a player who is 21. We're not talking about a Benjamin Sesko or a 23-year Hugo Ekitike. In other words, he sort of tailored his game in a particular way that has become effective for him that switching it up is not the easiest of things to do. That's one. Two, while he adapts his playing ways to the Arsenal way, Arsenal are trying to adapt to him as well. However, I think Arsenal have been the slower to adapt to his way of playing. He's often surrounded by players, one, who they themselves want to score, who I think have not got the command from their manager to impress it upon them that we need to find Victor as much as we can, as often as possible. Now, you'll observe, if you're akin to the tactical aspects of the game, you'll observe that oftentimes Victor Gyökeres is going to make the right runs, but he's not being found. And what usually happens is that he will make a good run, and then he is not played the ball, and then when he darts to sort of to avoid being offside or being caught in the wrong side of position or with the defenders, then that's when they attempt to find him, and then it's too late, and then suddenly he's either already marked and that he has to simply receive the ball, be a recipient of it, and then pass it on to the next player, onto him, or do a bit of a small hold-up play. But every time he makes that run in the channel, they need to find him quickly. And it's not to say that every time he makes the run, he is going to score. But for him to put himself in goal-scoring positions, he needs to be making these runs that eventually yield goals, because sometimes you ought to make a run in space and then have a teammate to play in and then reposition yourself into a place where you can score. Sometimes that's the nature of the run. So I think the factors lie in between there. And two, for a player that did not have preseason, he played a lot of football at the start of the season, which eventually culminated into an injury. Now he's just come back from an injury and he's trying to pick his rhythm again. Now, that in itself has an effect on the player. In other words, I do not think he's 100% fit. Even when you watched him yesterday, the energy with which he ran was not the kind of energy you saw him run against in a game like Newcastle, in a game like Atletico de Madrid in the UEFA Champions League. You could see, if you could notice that there was a bit of a drop-off, but I thought he was getting in the right spaces. He did not stay on the pitch long enough, maybe to finally get his moment, because he lasted about an hour or slightly over that, and he got withdrawn. Still, I think that's down to the manager trying to manage his game time as he gets back into rhythm, and particularly he has to do that because he's still not yet sure when he should expect Kai Havertz to come back. We know that while Gabriel Jesus has returned, he's so injury prone that in 2 weeks' time we could be talking about him having an injury setback or having suffered a niggle here and there, and he has to sit out a couple of games. So it's a number of factors, but it is true that the Arsenal players need to really try to find Victor Gyökeres as often as possible. Now, in finding him as often as possible, he's going to squander some chances. That's going to happen. It does happen to any striker, even to the most elite of strikers like Brad Erling Haaland. We've seen him fumble chances. Particularly, I do remember the one against Fulham before Manchester City opened the scoring. I think he hit the base of the upright, before that ball comes back into play. It was a keeper to beat. Then we saw Jude Bellingham yesterday trying a dink against Gianluigi Donnarumma, and you thought for a player of his quality and caliber, playing at the highest level, he should have been able to buy that chance. So even with Victor Gyökeres, that will happen, but they need to give him, to create as many chances for him. Now, allow me make reflection to Robin van Persie. When he left Arsenal and joined Manchester United, and this is right from the Manchester United dressing room, those players say that Sir Alex Ferguson told them one thing: this season, Van Persie is our man. When you get the ball, I don't care if you're Wayne Rooney, I don't care who you are. You're going to play the ball to Robin van Persie. For as long as he's up there, up front there, you're playing the ball to him. And basically, that's what they did all season. This was revealed by Rio Ferdinand. You remember, They came into that season, 2012, 2013, on the back of conceding the Premier League title to Manchester City the previous season, 2011, 2012. So they come into that season having identified that they needed a striker. For some reason, Arsene Wenger decided to do business with Manchester United. He switched allegiances for about £28 million. And Manchester United ended up winning the Premier League title. He was the top scorer that season again. I think he had been the top scorer for us in the previous campaign as well, and possibly in the Premier League. But the point is that Sir Alex Ferguson, even with the lots of experienced players that he did have, Ryan Giggs was still there. Of course, Wayne Rooney was still there. And you had all these sort of players in that cohort of a squad that were capable of scoring goals. But he said he is going to be our go-to guy, and whatever we do, we must find him wherever he is. Go back to the goal that Robin van Persie scores against Aston Villa on the volley. I think that long pass comes in from Wayne Rooney. On another given day, Wayne Rooney would be racing with that ball to try and go and score with him for himself, but he had that command from his boss. Let's find Robin van Persie. So I feel that whereas Arsenal is not accustomed to playing with that outright striker, whereas they are accustomed to their goals coming from multiple positions of the field, they ought to adapt to the fact that they now have a target man who they need to find as often as possible to get them the goals. The chances that Gabriel Jesus got in that game were, I think, twice as more than what Gyökeres got in his hour or so. Now, of course, you could make it about the difference in style of play for Gabriel Jesus and that of Gyökeres, but the chemistry that does exist between Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, and Gabriel Jesus, I think was there to see. That's for one thing. But Arsenal need to be deliberate in making their striker look good. Not just, handing him a penalty when they win it, but also in open play. For a team that has been criticized for being overly reliant on set pieces, if you have noticed, majority of the goals they've scored in recent times have been off set pieces. You go back to the Bayern Munich game, they only had one goal off a set piece. That was Julian Timber's goal. You go back to the game against Tottenham Hotspur, there's no set piece goal. You get to the game against Sunderland, that 2-2 draw, there's no set piece goal. You get to the Chelsea goal, it wasn't a set piece, it was a goal from open play. You get to the goals from Brentford, 2 goals from open play. You get to the goal against Aston Villa, released the loss. It was a goal from open play. You go back to yesterday's scores from open play. So, in other words, they are not incapable of creating chances. They are capable of creating them. They just need to be more deliberate. But then also, in this whole composition of trying to find Victor Gyökeres, you also have a player that needs to improve on themselves. And I said this yesterday, Martin Odegaard needs to be releasing the ball much quicker. He needs to be thinking that he needs to improve his decision making when it comes to holding on to the ball. Now, holding on to the ball is not a bad thing, and doing the drives or runs he does. Oftentimes it looks good. It's okay. But the decision making in terms of how quickly and when to release the ball is really, really important. Particularly yesterday. There's a time when I thought he should be releasing the ball quicker, and he did not. And then he attempted to play a through ball, which ended up being blocked. And I said, do the simple thing. When you go back to some of Arsenal's good players, especially in that part of midfield, particularly, allow me to make reference to 2 players, Cesc Fabregas and Santi Cazorla. Now, Santi Cazorla was the kind of guy who could hold onto the ball, that could make the runs. Same applied to Cesc Fabregas. But they knew when to release the ball quick and when to hold onto it. Now, Martin Odegaard struggles with striking a balance in those 2 instances. When do I hold onto the ball long enough? Or when do I release the ball quick enough? Again, he's not incapable of doing it because we have seen him do it before. He just needs to do it more often, So that's another part of it, because if you're going to be Arsenal's creative pinpoints, and you're Martin Odegaard, you need to be doing that. You need to be reading the pitch. You need to have the entire pitch in your vision. Look at go back to a player like against his Fabregas. He literally had the map of the pitch in his head. Before he received the ball, he knew where he wanted it to go next. If he was going to make the run, he knew that. If he was going to make a one-touch pass, he knew that. So Martin Odegaard needs to improve on that. I think he needs to be given a collection of Cesc Fabregas, playing, and then also be given a collection of Santi Cazorla playing for him to draw his comparisons to say, okay, this is how they did it. This is why I need to improve my game, and that's why he gets a lot of criticism, by the way, sometimes from Arsenal fans. Sometimes rightly so, sometimes wrongly so, depending on how you look at it. Take the example, Martin Zubimendi. Now, Martin Zubimendi created the most chances of any player. Yesterday, he created as many as 6 chances, including providing 2 assists in that game. How is it that your central midfielder playing at the pivot of that midfield is able to create those chances, and yet your creative midfielder is not able to create as many chances? The difference is in when you release the ball. When Zubimendi does not release the ball quick, I've seen this on 2 occasions. I think there could be more, but I saw it in yesterday's game, and then we saw it in the Tottenham Hotspur's game. When he holds onto the ball a little longer than he should, he often ends up conceding possession. But what makes him so good is releasing that ball quick. That as soon as he receives it, he's going to knock it to the next player and then put himself into space or into another channel to be played back in. That's how he does it. And Martin Odegaard needs to sometimes do that. You know how they often go and form that triangle on the right-hand side and do the interplay between him and Bukayo Saka, sometimes Ben White, because that's often been the successful trio. And of course, sometimes, Jurriën Timber, who has been the predominant figure in Arsenal's right back. He needs to do that all over the pitch, not just in that sort of section of the pitch. He needs to be doing that. Sometimes he does it, but when it comes to when it matters the most, you feel that, he's holding onto that ball a little longer. So I think that justifies or explains why Victor Gyökeres is still struggling to get enough chances. Because for people that are criticizing him for not scoring enough, they're not asking themselves, how many chances is he wasted? Because if he was receiving the chances and wasting them, then we could be having a different argument. Of course, in the game, for example, against Aston Villa over the weekend, I think he was suspect because there's a time when you expected him to make runs and he was absent in that area. I think on about 2 occasions when Arsenal play the ball and it goes across the face of goal and he wasn't there to try and tap it in and get his foot to it. But again, this happens in football. If you're constantly putting yourself in the right positions and you're not getting the ball, when you put yourself in those positions, you tend to have a withdraw kind of syndrome where you say, when I get myself in that position, I'm not receiving the ball. Maybe I need to change the position and then I'll receive the ball. Then as soon as you switch position, then they begin playing the ball in the positions you are earlier on occupying. So it happens in football. So I wouldn't want to be too hard on him just because of the incidents in the Aston Villa game. So that's how I looked at those things. Mikel Merino, I thought he had a good game. Mazué Kelly had a good game, provided an assist. However, my reservation with Mazué Kelly, and this I think has to do with age, it's something maybe it will come with experience, is that sometimes he's overly confident on the ball and wants to, because he's naturally a midfielder. Midfielders tend to do that very often in terms of holding on to the ball and trying to shield the ball or protecting it. Now, oftentimes he's attempted that and it ends in a foul. Sometimes he's been lucky to get those fouls. On another day, he may not get those fouls, and it may cost him and his team. So he needs to be careful. in holding on to that ball and trying to protect it, in trying to play as a midfielder when he is playing at left back. Because when you're playing at left back, alongside with your centre backs and the right back, you're the last line of defense, as opposed to being a midfielder where if you're playing as the number 6, your last line of defense are your centre backs and maybe the full backs. Or if you're number 8, if you lose the ball, your number 6 is within the zone to help you, and then eventually the defenders are brought in. So he needs to be cognizant of that fact. But otherwise, I thought he had an okay game. Ben White, I thought he was really, really brilliant. He was really, really brilliant. Although I thought he committed a foul that he shouldn't have committed because, it was high up the pitch, almost at the center line. But other than that, he was really, really okay. Christian Nogard, I thought he did really, really well playing for the first time. At least me watching him as a centre back, I thought he did okay. There was a moment in the box where he seemed lost before the ball is fumbled in the area, and Club Brugge get a shot away, which was saved by David Raya. But overall, I thought he did okay. Pierre Hincap, I thought he did okay. I would have loved for him to be rested, but because Ricardo Carafiori had an issue in the Aston Villa game, he wouldn't start this game. So I understand that, but again, he was withdrawn on time for him to be rested. Speaking of him being withdrawn, they brought on Ricardo Carafiori, and you remember that free kick that he concedes near the 18-yard box for a pulling on a Club Brugge player. Now, you may have viewed that as a tactical foul, but Ricardo Carafiori is equally suspect of committing some silly fouls sometimes, if you observe him. And I think that particularly explains why he's become the first Arsenal player to be suspended for accumulating 5 yellow cards, this season. For a team that has tried to work on their discipline, having received so many red cards last season, for I think twice, for Miles Lewis-Kelly, you had for William Saliba against Bournemouth, you had for Leandro Trossard against Manchester City, and you had for Declan Rice against Brighton and Hove Albion at home. So as many as 5 yellow cards, I think, through the course of the campaign last season. For a team that has managed to, so far, at least cut out, many of those costly mistakes, Carafiori can be a bit reckless with some of his challenges, and I think he needs to equally, work out on that. Otherwise, I thought they had a very, very decent game. It's no easy place to go and get a 3-0 win against Club Brugge. Noni Madueke, I cannot fault him for anything. He did what wingers do. He had a very good game. He dribbled past players. He had the pace. He had the eye for goal. And possibly could have even gotten a hat-trick if it hadn't been for Van Den in goal. He had just a brilliant game. Gabriel Martinelli scoring in his 50th consecutive game in the UEFA Champions League. He scored against Bilbao. He scored against Olympiacos. He scored against Atletico de Madrid. He scored against Slavia Praha. He scored against Bayern Munich. So really, he did not score against. I think he did not score in one of those games, but at least we know he scored in 5 consecutive Champions League games, and he has 5 goals. He's become the first Arsenal player to score in 5 consecutive Champions League games. And the question is, why is he thriving in the UEFA Champions League and not replicating the same form in the Premier League? Now, he himself said it yesterday because he was a part of the press conference, pre-match press conference with Mikel Arteta, and he said, in the Premier League, teams are overly parking the bus. They're playing with low blocks and sitting back a lot against Arsenal. And again, we've seen examples of that. Even Manchester City did it at the Emirates Stadium. We've seen it with teams like Brentford. We saw it with Tottenham Hotspur. We've seen it with Crystal Palace. We saw it with West Ham and things like that. So we saw it with Burnley. So they come a lot against low blocks, and he struggles against that. But also partly because he is not overly helped. He's not well supported down the left flank. I've made this argument before, and I'll reiterate it, is that when you watch Arsenal's over-reliance on the right wing, which is a criticism for me, in my opinion, against them, is that they have that over-reliance on the right wing. When they go and form that diamond, usually between Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, or Noni Madueke in this instance, and Ben White, or if it were to be Julian Timber, once the winger receives the ball, you have the right back making the overlap. Now, once the fullback is making the overlap, it drags away the attention of one or two defenders, and then that creates room for Bukayo Saka or Noni Madueke, in this particular case, to cut back inside and have an attempt on goal, or to play back in Martin Odegaard, who then can pinpoint a through pass for the overlapping football, to attempt and either play the cutback or a cross for them to get a goal. Now, while they do that quite very often on the right wing, I'm afraid they do not do the same quite very often on the left wing. In any case, they hardly do it. The only Arsenal player that has seemed to thrive and on that left wing has been Leandro Trossard. And I equally share the same school of thought that if he himself were to get more support, as is often accommodated on the right wing, then they can be more effective on the left wing as well. But oftentimes, when whoever is playing down the left wing, once they receive that ball, they're oftentimes isolated. Now, it's a little bit different when Declan Rice is playing, because Declan Rice tends to provide that bit of support. He tends to come in and provide that channel to be played into. Particularly, you have to go back. I'll give you the example. You remember the goal Mikel Merino scores against Real Madrid. It came from that side of the pitch. The ball is carried by, I think, Declan Rice. They play in, I think, Luis Kelly, but there was another player, a winger in that position, before they pass it back to Mikel Merino, and he fires it into the back of the net. But my point is, it was a combination of three players in that zone to create that moment. Now, they do not create that very often, So usually, when Arsenal's left back plays in the winger, whichever it is, Gabriel Martinelli, Gabriel Jesus, on another day, Ebeleche Eze, as we've seen this season, playing on the left wing, Leandro Trossard. Instead of the left back overlapping to create that channel, usually what they do is drift inwards in midfield to provide a playing position in there, but usually it's further up. Now, when you have the opponent's fullback covering the winger and one of the centre backs pulling in, you make it difficult. Or sometimes the opponent's number 6 pulling in within that zone to try and provide defensive cover, it makes it difficult, And it seemed yesterday as though Gabriel Martinelli had been told, you will receive the ball, attempt to make a cross, in the box, but I thought he did not have the sufficient support. And again, even when you see at the goal that he does score, he receives the ball and there's hardly a playing person in that channel. He has to drive it back inwards, and when he drives it back inwards, you had Mikel Merino waiting at the edge of the box, literally asking for that ball before Gabriel Martinelli decides to go for goal himself. But in terms of the run on his side here on the left, that cut through run that you'd expect the left back to be making, I did not observe that moment. I did not see the player making that run, So, and it ended up being a goal. It made him look good. But I thought they really, really did well. For a team that was missing as many players as they were missing, of course, Kai Havertz, William Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, Declan Rice. I mean, when you look at all those, senior players missing out in the game, Julian Timber, missing through injury, and then them going away and winning by 3-0 to maintain their perfect run in the UEFA Champions League, where it is 6 wins out of 6. They've only conceded 1 goal. That was by Leonard Karl against Bayern Munich. I mean, they've been really, really brilliant. For me, I can't help but wonder how Arsenal would look like if Mikel Arteta had his squad, good as it is, all available to his disposal. I think of it and I sort of, in my mind, imagine and anticipate the kinds of things he would be able to do to teams. And oh my God, Arsenal would be such a hard team to play against. they will be such a big threat to play against, because with 5 changes available to you and the kind of quality that they have in their squad, there's so many things you can change in a game if you would have his squad available. But we're talking about a team that has already suffered as many as 26 different injuries this season. I think in terms of players, when you look around, I think it's only David Raya and Yuan Timber for Arsenal players that have not suffered an injury at some point this season. Zubi Mendy suffered an injury at some point this season. We saw him being withdrawn in one of those games. Fortunately for him, it wasn't, that kind of lengthy injury that he needed to be out of action for 2 weeks or so. But at least every Arsenal player has tested injury in some form or shape this season. So really, that's a bit of a worrying sign. And the manager released some of the injuries have been sheer misfortune. He needs to do enough to manage the minutes that some of these players play. I do not think he needs to play some players into injury, the likes of Declan Rice. Rotate them whenever you can. You have players like Christian Nogard that you can rely on a given day. Mikel Merino can play for you at the base of the midfield. You just need to surround him with the right players, and the players around him need to be consonant. Now we are playing with a different player in that role. Again, because football is a team sport and teams form partnerships within the team itself, you must notice that players or teams go about their overall game differently when certain players have been changed in certain positions. Take an example. When it's William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes playing as centre-backs, they know the inefficiencies that may come with playing alongside Lewis Kelly as a left-back. So they provide that cover. They know what it means to play with Calafiori. They know what it means to play with Timber or Ben White at right back. They know what needs to be done when, let's say, Zubi Mendy is not present at the base of midfield. So they know how to go about that kind of situation, really, which is really, really crucial, So again, we've seen it. I think it was in the EFL Cup when Tommy Setford played for Arsenal in that game against Port Vale. Again, they knew the kind of goalkeeper they had, that this is a young goalkeeper, not so experienced. So we're not going to be looking to passing him the ball as often as we would if it were a David Raya. Again, look at Mali Solman when he came on yesterday. I thought it was intentional not to put him in compromising situations, as you would maybe a senior player like Ben White. You have to protect those players when they are playing, really. Speaking of cameos, Gabriel Jesus, I thought he really, really had a good game for the minutes he came on for. For somebody that had been out for as long as he had been, I thought that was really, really impressive. He had 2 chances. One, he tried to pass the ball into the back of the net. The other chance, he went for goal. Hit the crossbar. And I thought it was really, really the kind of performance that if you're an Arsenal fan, you have been pleased about seeing and thought, this is what we need. We need a player like Gabriel Jesus to be coming on at this point in the season, in a busy December, and what you anticipate will be a busy January with the FA Cup coming in, and then the Champions League returning around the 20th and 21st of January. This is the kind of player that we need to have in our squad. He came on in the 62nd minute, and he had a very, very good game. Ethan Wanyeri came on, had a brilliant game, really. I thought had a very, very brilliant game. He came on for Martin Odegaard. Mali Solomon came on in the 83rd minute, didn't have much to do, but I thought he had a good game. Ricardo Calafiori, beyond that, a pull on the opponent's player to cause a free kick on the edge, near the edge of the 18-yard box. I thought he equally had a very, very good game. So Arsenal really, really did well. Apologies if we've spent too much time discussing Arsenal's performance, but they are worthy of that time because they are at the summit of the standings. Having played 6 games and won all of them, conceding only one goal, when you come up against teams like Atletico de Madrid, when you come up against teams like Bayern Munich, is no easy ask. It's no easy ask when you played up against teams like Bilbao, who managed to hold PSG, the highest scoring team in the Champions League this season, who managed to hold them to a goalless draw, is impressive. When you've managed to come up against Olympiacos and keep a clean sheet, is impressive. So really, I think they are worthy of the time that we have spent on them. Nonetheless, we will not sleep on them. So allow me move on to the other game, and that was a game between Manchester City away to Real Madrid. Now, Real Madrid came into this fixture under a lot of fire and speculation. We know that there are reports emanating from the Real Madrid dressing room suggesting, or owing to the fact that some senior players do not respect Xabi Alonso and his tactics or his too many rules, at least perhaps more with the rules than the tactics. When you're managing a team like Real Madrid, for a team that is accustomed to playing with so many stars, you're going to deal with egos. You have players that think they play better football than you played in your days as a coach. You have players who think you're a nobody, even though you played for the same club, Real Madrid. But in terms of being a manager, you're a nobody because you've only managed by Leverkusen, And managing that can be a bit delicate. As impressive as Xabi Alonso was in his playing career, he wasn't a Zinedine Zidane, So as a manager, as a coach, you need to have the temperament and the emotional intelligence of how to navigate those egos within that dressing room. And I remember reporting on this channel of how Xabi Alonso had been deliberate on trying to cut out the egos that revolved within the Real Madrid dressing room around players like Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Junior, Rodrigo Goes, Jude Bellingham, those kinds of star players. Because we know that Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Junior, and Rodrigo Goes all have to play off the left wing. And yet only one player can be played there at a time. And that's why you have Kylian Mbappe playing centrally, and Adagula being put to the right, and things like that in some cases. So he came into this game under speculation that if he doesn't win this game, he will be shown the exit. Now, as of this morning, we've not received any news that he has been that he has been sent packing. But the jury is still out there. We do not know what is going to happen in the next couple of days. I will have to wait and see what will happen. But I thought, me personally, I do think that it would be premature to let go of Xabi Alonso, who I think by the last couple of 6 games, where I think they've only won 1. Actually, in the last 7 games, possibly they've won 2. They won against Olympiacos. They won against Bilbao. Then they lost to Celta Vigo. They've lost to Manchester City, so that's 2 wins and 2 defeats. Then they had 3 consecutive draws in the Spanish La Liga. So really, the last 7 games have not gone their way. And if you're managing a team like Real Madrid, questions are going to come on any given day if you have that kind of run. Especially if you do not have the pedigree as manager at that very club, the way, let's say, if things were going wrong for Pep Guardiola, he would be extended the olive branch. The way things, if were happening for Jurgen Klopp, as they did happen to him in the 2021-2022 Premier League season. Sorry, in the 2020-2021 Premier League season, as they happened to him when he lost 6 out of 7 Premier League games. You're not going to get that kind of leeway because you've not built the track record with that team for you to be extended the same courtesy. You're going to get the same questions if you're managing Barcelona, if you're managing, Bayern Munich, if you're managing Juventus, and that's why Igor Tudor was let go and they brought in Luciano Spalletti, those kinds of things. So for Xabi Alonso, questions are bound to come, but I think he's still a very, very capable manager to get this team through. Injuries have not helped his cause, but I thought yesterday they competed really, really well. Manchester City was just better, in Manchester City being better, they had a total of 7 shots on target compared to Real Madrid's 2, with a total of 11 shots on goal. Real Madrid had a total of 17 shots on goal, but only 2 were on target. So they lacked that clinical edge, Like I said, you had that close moment when Endrick heads the ball to the crossbar offer a Rodrigo Goes goal, who I thought had a really, really good game, by the way, had a really, really good game. For a player that had not scored or provided an assist in the last 30 plus games in Real Madrid colors, I thought he had a really, really good game. He opened the scoring in the 28th minute, but that lead lasted only, I think, lasted about 7 minutes before Nico O'Reilly scored to restore parity. Then you had another moment, Jude Bellingham goes through and then he tries to chip the goalkeeper and the ball goes over the bar, and that was from close range. I thought he should have done better in that moment. Then the other moment fell to, was it Fede Valverde? Yes, Fede Valverde attempted, but his shot was blocked. So Manchester City were the better team, really. I thought Ryan Cherki had a good performance. Jeremy Doku, Thibaut Courtois, for me, if anything, would have been the man of the match because of the amount of saves he had to do in that game to keep Real Madrid in the game, from the game running away from them, even though they never managed to bounce back. Manchester City overall possession was to the tune of 54%. Then Nico Gonzalez in that midfield, I thought he really, really competed well against that Real Madrid side with Bernardo Silva. They provided the perfect cover. Aurelio Tchouameni, Jude Bellingham, and Daniel Ceballos could have done better. But in terms of effort, you cannot fault Real Madrid for lack of effort yesterday. They really, really competed. They were just against a much better opponent at this point in time. And for those of you that do remember, in our preview, we did say our prediction had been a 2-2 draw or a 3-2 victory for Manchester City. And because we simply said that Manchester City were in a better moment or in a better phase in as far as current form is concerned compared to Real Madrid. And it basically boiled down to that. And it basically boiled down to that. But I thought Alvaro Carreras, what a player, playing at left back, former Manchester United player, signed on to Benfica. I left Benfica this summer for 50 million euros to join Real Madrid. For me, him and Thibaut Courtois were the best players, alongside Rodrigo Goes, were the best players for me on that Real Madrid side. On the side of Manchester City, I thought, even though Brad Erling Haaland stepped up and scored the penalty, I think to score his 55th goal in about 50 or something UEFA Champions League games, I thought Jeremy Doku, Nico Gonzalez, and Ryan Cherki were the standout players for me on the side of Manchester City, really. But impressive performance there. So that was the day yesterday. In as regards to the UEFA Champions League, like I said, Richard Rios and Leandro Barreiro were the goal scorers for Benfica as they beat up against Napoli. Newcastle conceded. Let's talk about Newcastle because what's his name? I'm trying to get your name. Dennis Jukes did ask us about Newcastle, and he said, yeah. Now, I did not get to watch the Newcastle game, I won't lie, but according to Daniel Jukes, Newcastle hit the crossbar twice in that game, and that that they could have easily won the game by 4-1. They yielded to a press that resulted into a goal that restored parity for Bayer Leverkusen. That's, again, another observation from the game. So, but an own goal from Bruno Guimaraes had given Bayer Leverkusen the lead in the 13th minute, and then a penalty from Anthony Gordon had restored parity. Then Luis Maeli scored to make it 2-1. Released Alejandro Grimaldo scored in the 88th minute to restore parity, to make it sure it was 2-2. But he also poses a question, or seems to allude to he poses a question that if Newcastle do not finish in the top 8 in the Premier League, and will Ed Howe, what is the pass mark? What is a pass mark for Ed Howe in the Premier League, and will the Saudis fire him if we do not finish in the top 8? I do not know if he will be fired, but whereas they've not had the best of stats, to the season in the Premier League. I thought they've done well in recent games. I thought Newcastle have done themselves some favors in recent games. When you look at their results in the last couple of games, you remember they beat up against Manchester City by 2-1. They went away to Everton and beat them by 4-1. They went and drew by 2-2 at St. James's Park against Tottenham Hotspur, which I thought was an okay result, even though it was a lapse of concentration for them in their defending, for them to concede the equalizer for the second time in that game against Cristiano Romero. And then they won against Burnley by 2-1. Now, for a team that did not have a brilliant start to the season, where they were winning one, drawing another, and losing the last 5 games, they've only lost one, losing to Brentford by 3-1. I thought they've done well. And when you look at the Premier League table, they're not so far off being within the top 8. Really, they are 12th on the Premier League table. They have 22 points. Now, for them to get to within the top 8, they're only 1 point behind the top 8, out of the top 8, because the 8th place team is Brighton and Hove Albion, and they have 23 points. Same applies for the 9th and 10th team in Sunderland and Liverpool, respectively. If they want to be as high as, let's say, 5th, they're only 3 points behind a 5th place Chelsea. Manchester United coming in 6th with 25 points as well, with Everton in 7th place with 24 points. So mathematically on the table, the jury is still out there. It's not far off. And it looks worse than it actually is in terms of the standings of the Premier League table. So are they capable of bouncing back? I think in my season predictions for the Premier League table, I stand to be corrected, but I seem to remember predicting that they will finish as high as, was it 5th on the Premier League table? I need to pull those predictions for me to give my right prediction. But I think I predicted Newcastle to finish 6th. Yes, 5th was Aston Villa. I put them 6th. But if they finish anywhere outside the top 8, then his job will be really at risk, because looking at the kind of project that the Saudis want to build and the kinds of investments that they've made, particularly when you go back to the summer, signing Yohan Wissa, who unfortunately has been out and has not made his debut. Last I checked, had not made his debut because of that knee injury that he suffered, has not helped their cause. But them, signing those kinds of players. Anthony, yesterday, actually, he made his debut. He came on in that game against Bayer Leverkusen. He came on in that game and had some minutes. But when you look at the players they signed in the summer, Jacob Ramsey from Aston Villa, Anthony Elanga from Nottingham Forest, Yohan Wissa, and Nick Voltmada. Not to forget Malik Theo, and on loan, Aaron Ramsdale. Now, that's 5 very, very decent players that they did sign. In addition to what they already have, their midfield trio, Joelinton, Bruno Guimaraes, and Sandro Tonali, not to mention the backups that they do have in those areas, the likes of Joe Willock, really. They have a good squad. Tino Livramento, very good right back, one that was being pursued by Manchester City. You look at their backline, Malik Theo, Steven Botman, Fabian Schär, Dan Burn, Kieran Trippier, that cohort of team, the goalkeepers, they have a very decent team. The attackers, Anthony Elanga, Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, Nick Voltmada, William Osula, really. In terms of their composition, it's a team that is capable of finishing within those high positions, possibly even challenge for top 4 if they can be consistent. Because when you look at a team like Chelsea, who are up there, they've not been that consistent in the Premier League this season. When you look at a team like Crystal Palace, is a team that they are better than Crystal Palace in terms of their squad and quality. It's a team that can rival for that top 4 place. When you look at Aston Villa, they're not too far away from Aston Villa. You would put them in the same basket. So they are capable of competing. But should Ed Howe not manage, one, to finish within the top 8, fail to win a cup competition, and they do not go far in the UEFA Champions League, then his job will be really, really at risk because he's ought to achieve something. Now, the advantage for him is they're in the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup, and we know that they are the reigning champions. He guided them to their first major piece of silverware in 71 years, ever since they won the Friends Cup so many years ago. Really, so one, if he fails to achieve top 8, and let's say he reaches the final of the EFL Cup or he gets beat at the semi-finals and then goes far in the FA Cup and maybe reaches the round of 16 or quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, they may sort of cut him some slack. They may cut him some slack because, like I've said, in some cases, injuries have not helped. He's had to lose his best player in Alexander Isak. He lost that one to Liverpool. They brought in a new striker, Nick Voltmada, who is hard to adapt to the team and gel into that squad. I think he's done fairly well so far. So the bit of factors here and there, and we know that Newcastle have not been in position to build their squad as fast as they would have loved due to due to being on handcuffs by the profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League. So I think when you assess all factors, I think he's done well. I do not think they will be too quick to cut ties with him, because also the question is, if you part ways with Ed Howe, who are you considering to bring in frames to take on this Newcastle side? Now, on paper or figuratively speaking, good managers seem to be a lot out there. But if we are being honest, there are not too many that are vacant or that would love to come to Newcastle, because the really good ones are already at big teams. Luis Enrique is at PSG. I do not think he's going to drop that job to come to Newcastle. I'm not saying it is impossible. When you look at a young manager, upcoming manager like Cesc Fabregas, I do not know. He's a part owner in Como. He was hesitant to leave. In other words, he refused to leave. Inter Milan wanted him. Bayer Leverkusen thought of him. Erik ten Hag would he? By the way, I still hold the opinion that Erik ten Hag is a very good manager, regardless of what happened to him at Manchester United and subsequently managing only 2 Bundesliga games with Bayer Leverkusen. You look around and think in the Premier League. Are you going to go to Ipswich Town and get Kian McKennie? It would be a huge step up. You do not know how that would fare out. Are you going to go? We've seen Thomas Frank has made the step up from Brentford to Tottenham Hotspur, and it's still a 50-50. The jury is still out there. Who else do you look around to? Sean Dyche is come out of unemployment to take on the reins at Nottingham Forest. I think he's done so far okay. But again, we'll judge him at the end of the season. Are you going to get David Moyes? I don't think so. Are you going to go and get Julian Nagelsmann? Maybe. He's a very good manager out there, currently with the German national team. He's a manager you can think of. Would Xavi be willing to come to Newcastle? I do not know. Maybe he will be interested in the project. I do not know. But he's one of the good managers out there. Simone Inzaghi decided to go to the Saudi Pro League. Whether you think it's for the money or otherwise, it's his prerogative. We're trying to scan around for good managers that would be switching allegiances, because you do not expect Hansi Flick to leave Barcelona to go to Newcastle. You do not expect Pep Guardiola to leave Manchester City to go to Newcastle. I do not think Jurgen Klopp would come to Newcastle. I'm not saying it is impossible, but he said he wouldn't manage any other team in the Premier League. Now, I know people change their words. They say only a fool does not change their opinion or mind, but Jurgen Klopp would be one of the good managers that Newcastle would bring in and cause a bit of a stir in the Premier League. But are they going to land him? I do not think so at the moment. So really, the question also is not about just you getting rid of a manager. If they fail to hit certain milestones, it also begs the question, who do you have your sights on? Look at Ruben Amorim, stellar manager at Sporting Lisbon, and he's sort of had his struggles with Manchester United. They could be on course to be much more improved than they were last season, but the jury is still out there. Look at Enzo Maresca. I do not think he's going to sacrifice Chelsea to go to Newcastle unless he is sacked at Chelsea, you know. And then who else? Give me names. Those are the ones that could come up off of my fingertips in terms of the managers. I do not think Zinedine Zidane, who is waiting for Didier Deschamps to run out his contract at the end of the World Cup to take over the French national team, is going to suddenly come to Newcastle. I do not think that could be the case. Who else? Bruno Lage, that was sacked at Wolverhampton Wanderers and at Benfica. I do not think he would be the good fit. And I'm not saying he's a bad manager, but I do not think he would be the good fit. Are you going to go for Claudio Ranieri to pull him out of retirement? I certainly do not think so. Massimo Allegri, I do not think he's going to leave AC Milan to come and join Newcastle. I'm not saying it's impossible, but at the moment, I think he's trying to build a good project on his second homecoming at AC Milan. So Antonio Conte, maybe Antonio Conte, we know now. Antonio Conte is a very good manager. He struggles in the UEFA Champions League. We know he guided Napoli to the Scudetto. They're still in the running to defend it. He's a kind of manager that you can't lure away from Napoli, and he comes to Newcastle. But Antonio Conte doesn't seem to be the kind of manager for long-term projects, even though he was at Juventus for quite a good period of time. He seems to be the kind of manager that you bring in to win something quickly, and then suddenly things go to shambles oftentimes, really. So he's not the one you look at for long-term projects. He's sort of he's a bit of a fixer in a way. Jose Mourinho leaving Benfica to come to Newcastle, it's a possibility, but I do not know. Would you think Jose Mourinho would be a perfect fit for Newcastle? We can only wait and see. So that's what I would say about that. Anyways, quickly, let's go away from the UEFA Champions League and go to the UEFA Europa League, because there's plenty of action that is going to be coming your way today. At 8:45 p.m., there will be plenty of games. Young Boys up against Olympic Lyon, Nice against Braga, Ferencváros against Rangers, Dinamo Zagreb at home against Real Betis, Sturm Graz against Crvena Zvezda, Ludogorets up against PAOK, Utrecht against Nottingham Forest, Midtjylland up against Genk, VfB Stuttgart take on Maccabi Tel Aviv. While at 11 p.m., Celta Vigo will be up against Bologna. FC Basel will be up against Aston Villa. Celtic will take on Roma. Porto will be up against Malmo. I remember Malmo got beat by Nottingham Forest by 3-0 in the last outing. Lyon will be at home against Netherlands' Go-Ahead Eagles. FCSB will be up against the Dutch side Feyenoord. Freiburg will be up against Salzburg. Brann will be up against Fenerbahce, while Panathinaikos are going to be up against Victoria Pilsen. That's for the fixtures to come your way in as far as the UEFA Europa League is concerned today. Speaking of the UEFA, apologies. But speaking of the UEFA Europa League, Jesus Christ, why do I need to struggle with you? In terms of the UEFA Europa League table, Lyon are at the summit, 4 games won, lost 1. 3 teams have 12 points. That's Midtjylland, Lyon, and Aston Villa. Freiburg come 4th, Real Betis 5th, Ferencváros 6th, all with 11 points, and 7th and 8th are FC Porto and Braga there. So then quickly on today, still there are games in the UEFA Conference League. I won't read all the fixtures. I'll particularly bring you to the know of who Crystal Palace will be up against. They will be up against Shelbourne. They'll be playing away against Shelbourne. Now, Crystal Palace, who we deemed our favorites in this competition, have only won 2 fixtures and lost 2. So they're going to be playing, they are 18th with only 6 points. So, but only 4 points adrift of the top sides. Now, the UEFA Conference League will have fixtures in the, I think, is it going to be the subsequent week or the other week? Let's see. Let's try and get this right. The Conference League, because you remember that Crystal Palace game against Arsenal in the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup, it had to be rescheduled because Crystal Palace will have a game in the UEFA Conference League on the 18th December. Yes. So that's next week. Next week, the UEFA Conference League will be on, and they will play, and then the subsequent week is when they will not play, and that's when their game against Arsenal was scheduled to be for the quarterfinals. So they have to play match day 5 and then play match day 6 the subsequent week, so that all European competitions are at the same level, with 6 games played across the board before we return in January. Pedri Bola says, do not get surprised if Arsenal win the UEFA Champions League. Well, let's wait and see. Only time will tell. Liverpool were almost flawless last season in the UEFA Champions League. They won 7 out of 8 games, losing, I think, only to, was it PSV, by 3 goals to 2. But they got crushed out at the round of 16. So you could be perfect here, and then, you lose to a very unlikely opponent, or even a likely opponent, or a very worthy opponent. When it comes to the knockout stages, we'll just have to wait and see. They will bottle. That's Pedri. And then says, Nebila Kalu says, what do you mean by flawless? They are on top of the table. No, I'm saying, I was making reference to Liverpool, that they were almost flawless last season during the league format. They won, I think, 7 games out of 8, really lost only 1, and they finished at the summit of the standings of the UEFA Champions League, but got knocked out by PSG at the round of 16, despite winning 1-0 at Parc des Princes in France, and lost by a goal to 0 at Anfield in normal time before the game ended up on penalties, before Liverpool were knocked out. So when it comes to the knockout stages, it becomes a bit of a different case. You could come against a worthy opponent and they knock you out. So anything can happen. That's all I'm trying to say, that at the knockout phase, anything can happen. But yeah, they do have a chance. They are one of the favorites, in my opinion, having gone as far as the semi-finals last campaign and got knocked out by who turned out to be the eventual champion in PSG. They've come up against arguably against one of Europe's most elite and best informed teams against Bayern Munich, and they managed to overcome him. So that in itself was a signal that they are capable, really, of going all the way. So only time will tell. But if the injuries, if they continue struggling with the kind of injuries they are struggling with, then unfortunately for them, it may be a premature end to their campaign. You say, I will miss the UEFA Champions League. Well, we will all miss it, but it will return on the 20th and the 21st of January 2026. So looks like it won't be too long. We'll only miss it for about a month and a week or thereabout, really. So, but it will get back. So in the meantime, you'll be enjoying all our league football from elsewhere. Anyways, guys, what can I say? It's been a pleasure doing this. It's been 1 hour and 19 minutes. Thank you so much, Dennis Jukes. Thank you so much, Alex. There. Thank you so much, Div. Thank you so much, Pedri Bola. Thank you so much, Nibikalu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. Okay, you do not know the future yet, so don't say they are flawless. I'm at the moment, Arsenal have been flawless. That's the honest speed. They've not lost a game. So, but of course, tomorrow is different. None of us is tall enough to see what will happen tomorrow. So, that's why, I cannot bet my arm on it that they are going to win it or that they are not going to win it, because I'm not tall enough to see what will happen tomorrow. Perhaps only God knows what will happen tomorrow. But yeah, they do have a chance. They do have a chance. I sort of fancy them. If we look at the UEFA Champions League and talk about title contenders, you'll talk about, of course, you'll talk about Arsenal, you'll talk about Bayern Munich, because they put themselves in that frame. You'll talk about the reigning champions in PSG because they really, really have a good team, So you'll talk about Manchester City. They've won it before, 2023. Inter Milan reached the finals last season. Real Madrid, the most successful team in the UEFA Champions League, So really, they may not look in the best of shape. They are capable. Barcelona, they may be 15th on the current table, but you cannot rule them out. I wouldn't put Barcelona ahead of Tottenham Hotspur in terms of being who is favorites for the UEFA Champions League title this season, really. So, Liverpool could be looking pretty bad, but they do have the pedigree in as far as the continent is concerned. They have their pedigree. So let's not forget that. So anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you all. Thank you so much for being part of today's broadcast. I really, really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much for your submissions. I want to wish you a blessed rest of the day. Let's meet up again later tonight at 11 p.m. East African time to discuss more of what football will have to offer on that night. And then we'll also get into the weekend where the Premier League will be heading into match day 16. And we'll see what will be happening across Europe. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.